Hello, my wonderful third graders. I hope you're having a good day. We are still studying European exploration of North America. This is lesson 8. Tomorrow will be our last lesson in this domain, but today we are learning about Henry Hudson. Is the name Hudson familiar? We'll find out. Some vocabulary you will hear throughout the read aloud. Abounds is a verb. It means occurs in great quantities. Archipelago is a chain of islands. Cultivation is the growing of crops, the caring of crops. The water and nutrients in the healthy, rich soil made the cultivation of crops easy. Narrowed is a verb. It means became narrower or not as wide. Unfamiliar is an adjective. It means not known, not experienced. John Cabot was not the only person who was eager to find a northwest passage to the Indies. English explorer Henry Hudson had the same goal. Very little is known about Henry Hudson's early life, but we do know he had an interest in exploring Arctic geography. Hudson made his first attempt to find the Northwest Passage in 1607, more than 100 years after Cabot made his voyages. Hudson's idea about how he might get to the Indies was similar to Cabot's. Hudson's idea was to sail north, right over the North Pole. He knew the polar region was cold and icy, but he also knew that the sun never set during the summer months. He thought the summer sun might melt a lot of the ice, making it possible to sail over the top of the earth and come out on the other side of the world in Asia. Amber, you remember talking about the Arctic tundra? That's what he was trying to sail through, the Arctic tundra. In May of 1607, Hudson embarked from England with a single ship called the Hopewell. 6 weeks later, in the middle of June, his men sighted the eastern coast of Greenland. Hudson sailed along the eastern coast of Greenland, then he turned and sailed northeast. He would have headed due north, but ice prevented him. Over the course of this voyage, he and his men saw many unfamiliar creatures, including whales, seals, and walruses. In mid-July, they reached the Spitsbergen Archipelago, which is a chain of islands that has an Arctic climate. What do you see in this image? Do you think Hudson will succeed in sailing over the North Pole? Look at the map and we see Greenland up here. Remember we talked all about Greenland when we talked about the Vikings. When Hudson tried to navigate this region, it was surrounded by pack ice, frozen seawater. On May 16th, Hudson's ship almost got stuck in the ice. For a while it was touch and go. Touch and go is a saying that means that someone is in a dangerous or unpredictable situation. We'll talk more about that later. A few days later, Hudson decided he could not reach the North Pole because of all the ice. He turned around and sailed back to England. Do you think he's done? In 1608, Hudson made a second attempt to reach the East Indies by sailing the Hopewell across the North Pole. He sailed north of Scandinavia and Russia. He sailed more than 2,500 miles, making it to the islands off the coast of Russia known as Novaya Zemlya, which means new land. But there was so much ice in the water that he had to turn back. In 1609, Hudson made a third attempt to find the Northwest Passage. This guy does not give up. This time he sailed for the Dutch under the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company was a trade company that formed to protect their trade in the East Indies. So the Dutch people live in the European country called the Netherlands, also known as Holland. The company hired Hudson and gave him very specific instructions. He was to follow a similar route he had attempted on his previous voyage, sailing north of Scandinavia and Russia. The hope, as before, was that he would be able to sail over the top of the earth and emerge in Asia. Hudson left Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, in April of 1609 on board the Dutch ship the Half Moon. As he made his way north, he saw more and more ice. Eventually, there was so much ice that Hudson decided to give up and turn around in mid May. Instead of sailing back to Amsterdam as he has been told to do, Hudson boldly decided to sail west. Hudson sailed across the Atlantic and sighted Newfoundland on July 12th. Do you remember where Newfoundland is in Canada? He sailed along the coast of North America, exploring much of what is now the east coast of the United States. He and his men sailed as far south as Virginia, where the Jamestown settlement had recently been established. Then they turned north. So, looking at this map, we see Greenland, we see Newfoundland, and then Jamestown is down here. Okay, we will be talking about Jamestown in our next domain. Who has a guess of what it's about? Here we have a map of the United States. So here's the coast. He was on the eastern coast of the United States right here, and he traveled about down to here. On September 3rd, they came upon a large river that emptied into the Atlantic. Hudson and his men explored the river, sailing upstream. When Hudson saw the river widening out, he thought it might be a passage that would lead all the way through North America. He thought the river he was exploring might be the Northwest Passage he and the explorers before him had been seeking for years. Farther upstream, the river narrowed, and Hudson began to think maybe it would not lead him through the continent. Nevertheless, it was an interesting discovery. Hudson claimed the area for the Netherlands and the Dutch. Upstream means to go against the flow of the river. Because this river, like many rivers, flows from a higher place in the north to a lower one in the south, in which direction did Hudson sail if he sailed upstream? He sailed north. Hudson, the name Hudson and river, does it remind you of anything? Hudson and his crew encountered many Native Americans of the Algonquin-speaking tribes on their trip up the river. Some Native Americans tried to attack them, whereas others visited the ship to trade. The Indians offered furs to Hudson in trade, and this started the fur trade along the Hudson River. Oh, the Hudson River. Do you remember talking about the Hudson River in our light and sound domain? Who went fishing at this Hudson River? One group invited Hudson to dinner. Later, Hudson described what he had experienced in his journal. I sailed to the shore in one of their canoes with an old man who was the chief of a tribe consisting of 40 men and 17 women. These I saw there in a house well constructed of oak bark and circular in shape, so that it had the appearance of being built with an arched roof. It contained a great quantity of maize or Indian corn and beans of the last year's growth, and there lay near the house, for the purpose of drying, enough to load 3 ships, besides what was growing in the fields. On our coming into the house, 2 mats were spread out to sit upon, and some food was immediately served in well-made red wooden bowls. 2 men brought in a pair of pigeons which they had shot. They supposed that I would remain with them for the night, but I returned after a short time on board the ship. The land is the finest for cultivation that I ever in my life set foot upon, and it also abounds in trees of every description. These natives are a very good people, for when they saw that I would not remain, they supposed that I was afraid of their bows, and taking their arrows, they broke them in pieces and threw them into the fire. Wow, Hudson sounds quite a bit different than the conquistadors we've learned about. In late September, Hudson decided to sail back to Europe. He himself wanted to stay in the New World for the winter, but his men were tired of exploring and were threatening to mutiny. You heard the word mutiny a few days ago. What is a mutiny? When you turn against your leader, a refusal by followers to obey the rules and order of the person in charge. So here mutinying is used as a verb. They're going to mutiny. The river Hudson discovered on his third voyage was later named after him. Even today, it is known as the Hudson River. Other Dutchmen came to this part of the world after Hudson. They built a city at the mouth of the Hudson River on an island the Indians called Manhattan. The Dutch called this city New Amsterdam. Later, its name was changed to New York. Today, Manhattan is the name of one of the parts of New York City, and New York City is the most populous city in the United States. Have any of you all ever been to New York City? I've only been once, and I wasn't there for very long. It is huge and so different. The mouth of a river is the place where it ends or empties into another body of water, such as the ocean. In 1610, Hudson set off on a fourth voyage. This time he was sponsored by two English companies, the Virginia Company and the British East India Company, similar to the Dutch East India Company. These companies were also trading companies. Hudson's goal was the same, to find a northwest passage, a water route that would lead through the American continents and allow ships to sail to Asia. Hudson sailed west, but he stayed far to the north. He reached Greenland in early June. A few weeks later, he and his men found a large strait that led into the center of North America. Hudson hoped it might lead all the way through to Asia. On August 2nd, Hudson sailed out of the strait into a large bay. Today, this bay is known as the Hudson Bay, and the strait is known as the Hudson Strait. Hudson spent the next few months exploring the coast of the bay. In November, his ship got stuck in the ice. He and his crew had to go ashore for the winter. It was a difficult, freezing cold winter. The men were fighting with Hudson as well as with one another. Several of them fell ill with scurvy, a disease that preys on people who have not been eating a healthy, balanced diet. So you can see up here more in Canada, you can see the Hudson Bay. When spring came, Hudson wanted to explore some more. Most of the men on the ship wanted to sail back to England. A big fight broke out. In the end, the sailors did mutiny. They mutinied. They put Hudson, his son, and some others they did not like in a small open boat and sailed away. Henry Hudson, the great explorer, was never heard from again. Bum, bum, bum. It's kind of sad. I'm going to choose to believe that he went back to the Native Americans and he became buddies with them and they lived together forever. But that is just my wish for him. Henry Hudson had made four voyages to North America from Europe. Why did he make these voyages? He was searching for a northwest passage from Europe to Asia. Right? They want a faster way to get to Asia. Hudson's search was similar to that of what other explorer that we learned about yesterday? John Cabot. Approximately how many years after Cabot's voyage did Hudson embark on his expedition? 100 years. Why did explorers such as Cabot and Hudson search for a northwest passage? To find a faster and less expensive route to Asia. For his first voyage, how did Hudson's search for a northwest passage differ from that of John Cabot's? What was Hudson's plan? Cabot tried to sail west along a northern latitude, whereas Hudson tried to go straight over the North Pole. Maybe he was hoping to see Santa Claus on his way. Did Hudson's first voyage succeed? Why or why not? No, he had to turn around and return to England because he could not sail through the ice. Although he's not successful in finding a northwest passage on his first voyage, Hudson did see some unfamiliar wildlife near this Spitzbergen archipelago, which is a string of islands with an Arctic climate. What animals did Hudson and his crew see in the northern waters through which they sailed? Amber, these are animals that live in the Arctic tundra. Walruses, seals, and whales. Did Hudson succeed in finding a northwest passage on his second voyage? No. On Hudson's third voyage, he started out by once again seeking a northwest passage over the top of the earth, but again failed. Instead of returning to his home port, he disobeyed his orders and sailed west. What settlement that had just been established 2 years before did Hudson see in the New World? We'll talk about this in our next domain. It was called Jamestown Settlement. On this third voyage, Hudson found a waterway that he thought might be the Northwest Passage. What is this waterway called today? The Hudson River. What populous city today is located at the mouth of the river explored by Hudson and his crew? It's the most dense populated city in the U.S., New York City. On Hudson's fourth and final voyage, he continued to search for a Northwest Passage. Did he find it on this voyage? Again, no. What part of North America did he explore on this voyage? The area around present-day Canada and the areas now known as the Hudson Strait and the Hudson Bay. At least he had places named after himself after he went there. How was this fourth voyage the last straw for the crew? The crew could not go on one more day and wanted to go home. They mutinied, leaving Hudson and several others, including his son, behind in a small boat, never to be heard from again. Our word for the day is unfamiliar. In the read aloud you heard, he and his men saw many unfamiliar creatures, including whales, seals, and walruses. Say the word unfamiliar. When something is unfamiliar, it is unknown or has not been experienced by someone. The prefix un means not. So when it's added to known, it becomes, when it's added to familiar, it becomes not familiar. Robin and Carolyn passed an unfamiliar sign on their way to the grocery store. So, we've been talking a little bit about sayings and phrases. An idiom is an expression which meaning goes beyond the literal meaning. Remember, literal means exactly what it says, and it has a different meaning. Like, it's raining cats and dogs. It's not actually raining cats and dogs, probably. It's just raining a lot, and it's crazy. So you say it's raining cats and dogs. So have you heard anyone describe a situation as touch and go? This phrase does not literally mean touching something and going away. This phrase is a British expression related to ships and sailing, and it describes an unsafe situation or a situation that is likely to get worse. This expression generally refers to ships that were touching the bottom of a shallow area. If the ship didn't get stuck and was able to continue floating, it could continue to go. It touched and then it goes. The expression touch and go can also be figurative, and it refers to a situation where things are at just enough of an equilibrium or balance to be safe. But even the slightest touch or change can make something go down or maybe make a bad situation. What part of Henry Hudson's voyage was touch and go? Remember, his first voyage was touch and go because his ship almost became stuck on the ice, but then was able to escape. On his fourth voyage, Hudson's ship did become stuck, and he and his men had to go ashore for the winter. Finally, Hudson's men had experienced enough touch and go situations, the last of which became their last straw, and they mutinied against him, taking his ship and sailing back to England. Have you ever experienced a touch and go situation that was somewhat unpredictable or perhaps dangerous? Like you were worried something bad was going to happen if just the slightest thing went wrong. People say touch and go quite a bit when like someone's sick and dying, or you're not sure how someone's going to be. You can say touch It was a touch and go situation. All right, you are going to fill out your journal entry for Henry Hudson. Remember the things you learned about him. Why did Henry Hudson sail? What was he looking for? Just like John Cabot, he was looking for a northern strait, a shorter way to get to the East Indies. For which country did Henry Hudson sail? He sailed for 2 different countries, right? He sailed for England at first, and then he sailed for the Dutch, which is the Netherlands. What areas did Henry Hudson explore? He went into the Arctic, right? Parts of Canada, north of Russia. He went to the eastern coast of the United States. And then describe what he encountered there. Good job, third graders. I liked Henry Hudson a little more than the other explorers. He seemed kinder.